My name is Henry Terpstra,
And I'm Daniel Kuiper.
and for our final project, we worked on setting up a storage spaces direct deployment, which didn't work out as quite as we planned, so we ended up just settling for a cluster storage with VMs. We had lots of help from Professor Wieringa. So storage space direct is the way I sort of visualize it. It's sort of like having a RAID across multiple machines. It scales the data you have across multiple machines. Um, and what's nice about it is then if you have hard drives laying around or if your workload works well with it, you don't have to have a NAS around for extra storage. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, it just kind of combines the disks together. So that's what we were going to do in the first place. So Chris Wieringa got some servers to work with, and we set those up. He set up a few networking things like the 10 gigabit fiber um, cables together and the dual copper cables between the servers. That was for management, and the 10 gigabit were for data. So we installed our operating system on the servers on a single RAID 0 drive, and we had an additional RAID 0 drive as in a separate array, which we were going to store our VMs on.
So we lovingly named our machines 338 TCS 1 and 2, TCS standing for Timothy Christian Schools, where we went to high school, and also lovingly named them Carleton and Whartonby over two of our teachers in high school. So the top one, TCS 1 is Carleton, and TCS 2 is Whartonby. So administrative shared drives, we did this in the Windows installation configuration lab. This is how we're able to put installers and things onto our servers because we don't have a GUI installation. So we're not able to use very easily, at least, a web browser to download whatever we needed to do. So we needed to get drivers for the 10 gigabit fiber cards,
Right.
those NICs. That wasn't super difficult, but it was really surprising, like how that was just totally unseen. There was no way for us to see in any part of the computer on the software level where those NICs were. So we really needed those drivers. And then we also set up remote access so we could access the machines from the syslab. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So what we had to do was team the NICs together with just a couple of PowerShell commands. So you can see in the picture below that we had a bunch of Ethernet connections. We had our 10 gigabit ones were Ethernet 7 and 8, as well as I believe 6. And we used those to make our Carleton connection.
Yep. And I think we're actually missing the exact code that we used, but I think it was really verbose. So it was something like using the names of the Ethernet 6 and 7 together. And yeah, so I was able to combine those in this case, we did this for the management, the two 1 gigabits together for our management stuff, and that's what's labeled as Carleton. For Hyper-V, this is where the rubber hit the road. This is what we needed to really be working on. It allows us to do virtualized computer systems on a single host. This is the basis for Storage Spaces Direct and everything else that we did. It was a little bit of a difficult time getting it to work because we really wanted to use PowerShell only. We were really trying to, and it just wasn't working out all the time. So on the syslab machines, we had to use Server Manager for part of it to make sure some of the features were installed. So we were able to get Hyper-V on the machines with a PowerShell code, but then I bet we probably could have done some of the other stuff with PowerShell, but man, there was just no documentation. So we used Server Manager on the syslab machines to do the rest. So we added the features data center bridging, failover clustering, and multipath I/O. Those are some things that Chris let us know we needed to have. Definitely the failover clustering, that's what we worked on a lot, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, and the server manager was just on one of the lab computers on our CSAD login because we linked it to the Active Directory. And we had to go manually move the servers to our OU to link it there.
Right. Originally, for some reason, they popped up in the something imaging OU in Active Directory. So anyway, we were able to migrate that over. And once we got Hyper-V installed, that's when we were able to see stuff in Server Manager in Active Directory. So that was kind of cool. So virtual switches, this is a lot of networking stuff we had to do. So virtual switches allow the different machines to talk to each other, as long as they have Hyper-V on them. So this is really this is again a big part of Storage Spaces Direct. We had to do a lot of different networking stuff. So virtual switches, we had to create one on each,
Yep.
right? So I guess it's pretty much just like it sounds. Instead of having a physical routing switch, this is making one virtually, so we're able to connect them together but still make them separate, I guess. But it was a little bit of a pain to get this working, but this particular code worked. And then below you can see in the image, it shows the switch that we created on one of the machines. I don't remember which one, but we did this on both machines.
Mm-hmm. So once we had our virtual switches, we needed to add some interfaces onto those switches. So for a failover cluster, they kind of recommend as best practice, there's a lot of separate data streams. So one for like migrating VMs between the two servers in the cluster, or however many nodes you have, and different other streams. So one for like the two nodes to talk to each other in the cluster and make sure they're all both still running fine. So separate streams for that, but they also say that it's fine just to have at least two, just to separate out traffic for load balancing. So we just had to add some interfaces on these to some VLANs that Chris set up for us ahead of time. So that's VLAN 2001, 2002, which he set up beforehand. We also needed to then assign those interfaces and those VLANs to different subnets, which we just added on the right here. We have our set net IP address, and we had to remove one of the ones we already had created earlier and make a new net IP address.
Yeah, this was a big head scratcher. We worked on this last week for several hours. And so a failover cluster, the point of it, as far as I understand, is if one of the servers were to go down, all of the information would be migrated to the other one, right?
Yeah,
Is that the idea?
Yeah, the load gets shared between them, and if one goes down, the other one can pick up the work from the one that went down.
Yeah, so that's a pretty cool feature of this whole thing, and that I think is really what Storage Spaces Direct is all about. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get that working. What happened was, what I think it boiled down to is a hardware issue.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
We were able to get a cluster running.
Yep.
And in theory, if we had the right software, perhaps we could make it work, that we could put stuff on the failover cluster, and if one machine were to go down, it could move to the other one. But that is the part that we weren't able to get. We think that either there might have been a driver issue, or it might not. I don't think the machines were too old or anything, but it just wasn't recognizing the second drive. What we mentioned earlier, we had a RAID 0 for the first and another one for the second. I think that might have been goofing things up a bit, but it was very difficult to see our second drive in each machine. As they were unformatted and uninitialized at first. And then we're like, okay, so we're not able to put anything on the drive then. So then we initialized it.
Yep.
We still weren't able to put anything on it. Then we made a volume.
Yep.
We still weren't able to put anything on it. And so, yeah, we got a bunch of errors and stuff that we probably could have shown you, but it was just sort of defeating. Anyway, but once we did get the networking set up, what we were able to do was create these clusters, which used, again, some more PowerShell code.
Yep.
Like we said, the disks weren't quite compatible. We think that was the issue. Thanks to Chris, he let us know that we could, once we got this part finished, for the most part, we could call it a day, and so we appreciate that. So we were able to create some VMs.
Yeah, we were able to create the VMs and assign them to the cluster, so we could see them on both ends of the cluster.
Right.
But we just didn't have any storage for the VMs or a common space to put them.
Yeah, we had a really hard time trying to figure out how to make the cluster allow for storage.
Yeah.
We tried a lot of different stuff for a few hours today and yesterday.
And that was the problem with the disks, just not being able to
Right.
be added to the cluster. It just didn't recognize them somehow.
Yeah. So if we had been able to add storage to the cluster,
yeah, we would have pretty much been done. We could have tested out the failover cluster by having a planned migration, just sending a command to send a VM over to the other node in the cluster, or like pulling the plug on one server, or just telling it to stop and then see if the other one picks up the slack. and then that would have shown that what we did was good, but we weren't able to get that far.
Yeah, so that's what we did. We're actually pretty proud of everything we were able to accomplish. It was really interesting to be able to get into the server room again, look at the hardware, and
Yeah,
then
for sure.
we had a lot of PowerShell stuff.
Definitely
and
learned a lot.
Definitely learned a lot, especially with PowerShell. Like I was very not confident coming in, and the guides we had were okay. It's just things
Yeah.
are different between different machines. So anyway, thanks for listening to our presentation, and we hope you have a great rest of your semester. Hope exams go well, and yeah.
Yep. Have a great summer.
Yep, that's us.